What if the very institution you married into, the crown, the monarchy, the world's most watched royal dynasty, quietly erased your future? What if they didn't strip your title, but something far worse? They stripped your voice. And not just yours, but even your right to know what's happening with your own children, your own bloodline. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Sounds too cruel to be true? Well, 5 minutes ago, the palace confirmed the one move no one believed they would ever actually make. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, will no longer receive any communications about the line of succession. Not even those concerning Prince Archie or Princess Lilibet. Yes, you heard that right. A mother, locked out of her children's royal legacy. Silently, systematically, and with surgical precision. And if you think this is just another petty feud, think again. This has been brewing for years. Behind closed doors, hidden in legal memos, whispered in corridors of power. But now, it's out. And what's worse, this is just the beginning. Because this move isn't about protocol. It's about power. And someone at the palace has just drawn a red line through Meghan's name. Perhaps forever. But why now? Why this moment? And why does it feel personal? Let's go back. Because to understand the chilling finality of this announcement, you need to see the timeline. The unspoken war that's been quietly raging behind the glossy photos, the Commonwealth smiles, and the Windsor Christmas cards. This isn't just about Meghan. It's about an institution tightening its grip and making sure no outsider ever gets this close again. But Meghan wasn't just any outsider, was she? She was the revolution they didn't plan for. A biracial, American divorcee who didn't play by their rules, who didn't smile on cue, who didn't kneel and curtsy in quiet submission. They called her difficult. They called her ambitious. They called her dangerous. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For a moment, Meghan Markle was the future of the monarchy, until she wasn't. And now, she's not even in the inbox, not even on the CC line. They've deleted her. And done it with the kind of cold, calculated efficiency that screams of one thing: damage control. Let's not forget, this is the same institution that tried to survive Diana's death by burying emotion, that outlasted Prince Andrew's disgrace by hiding behind silence, that navigated Prince Harry's memoir by pretending nothing happened. But this is different, because Meghan's exclusion isn't just symbolic. It's structural. It means she will no longer be notified, briefed, or looped in on any discussions, decisions, or policy communications regarding the succession of the British throne, including those that involve her own children, who, technically, remain within the line of succession. Technically. But let's ask the question no one wants to answer out loud. What happens to a royal child when their parent is deemed untrustworthy by the crown? What happens when silence becomes strategy? And more importantly, who benefits? Because here's what no one is talking about. This wasn't a hasty decision. No way. This was calculated, coordinated, and almost certainly signaled months in advance to the right people, the ones who still live behind palace gates and keep the ancient order running. You want shocking? Try this. The palace memo that confirmed Meghan's exclusion didn't just go to senior royals. It also went to legal teams, constitutional advisors, and, wait for it, the Home Office. Why? Because what's at stake now isn't just image or scandal or headlines. It's status. It's sovereignty. It's the invisible machinery of monarchy ensuring that its bloodline remains untouchable, unsullied by what they now frame as a Hollywood interlude gone too far. So again, why now? Why, suddenly, has Meghan been formally and legally excluded from succession updates? Some say it's because King Charles wants peace and sees Meghan as a destabilizing force. Others whisper about an internal recommendation from Princess and herself, who reportedly argued for clarity of roles moving forward. But the most chilling theory? That this was William's doing. That the Prince of Wales, future king and current de facto strategist, made the call to cut off all succession ties from the Sussex branch until further notice. Yes, including the children. Now, some of you watching may be thinking, wait, isn't that illegal? Or even, isn't that just cruel? Let's pause there. Because cruelty is subjective. But exclusion? That's legal. That's procedural. That's something a monarchy does with the stroke of a pen, under the guise of streamlining or modernization. And right now, the word inside the palace is that everything is being streamlined in preparation for a smaller, tighter monarchy. Translation: fewer people at the table, fewer voices in the room, fewer risks of rebellion. And Meghan, the woman who walked away from royal life, sued tabloids, exposed palace secrets to Oprah, and now sells jam and cookies in California, is no longer part of that equation. She's an external entity, and so, in their eyes, she doesn't need to be informed, even if the decisions being made are about her children. This is the part that hits hardest, because Meghan isn't just being frozen out, she's being institutionally forgotten. And once you're off the list, you're off the record. Which brings us to a chilling reality. Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet may be growing up with royal blood, royal names, but without any royal representation. Because their mother, the only adult in their household who might speak up for their legacy, is now legally locked out of that conversation. No briefings, no advisory updates, no heads up before public announcements. She'll find out when the world finds out, on Twitter, or from a friend, or in a news article, hours after it's already too late. Ask yourself this: what message does that send? Not just to Meghan, but to every single outsider who ever dreamed of modernizing the monarchy. They'll smile for your wedding photos. They'll toast your engagement. They'll give you a tiara, maybe. But when the smoke clears, and the scandals start, and the baby arrives, and the headlines get ugly, they close ranks. And you're left out in the cold. But this isn't just emotional. It's strategic. And the reason this matters right now is because of what's coming. Because there are whispers, real, documented whispers, of an upcoming restructuring of succession policy. A quiet recalibration of how future heirs are briefed, styled, and even protected. And with Charles's health now under scrutiny, with William stepping into more leadership roles, and with the future of the monarchy already being planned by the next generation, Meghan's absence from the room isn't just symbolic. It's a statement, one that says the future belongs to them, not her, not Harry, and perhaps not even Archie and Lilibet. And if you think this ends with a memo, you're wrong. Because behind that one paragraph lies a trail of hidden documents, redacted clauses, and quiet legal frameworks, some drafted years ago, just in case this exact scenario ever happened. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever seen a life erased with just 4 sentences? Not through scandal, not through screaming headlines, but through a quiet, chilling memo, drafted, signed, and released with all the emotion of a tax receipt. Because that's what happened just days ago. A document, so brief it could fit on a postcard, just flipped the royal chessboard on its head. And Meghan Markle? She wasn't even told it was coming. The memo in question was issued not with pomp or drama, but with the quiet, unmistakable tone of finality. A tone that screamed, "This is not up for discussion." So what did it actually say? Well, that's the terrifying part. It didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It didn't even explain. Instead, in language so sterile it might have come from a corporate HR department, the memo calmly stated that all future communications regarding the royal line of succession, including legal and ceremonial developments, will be restricted to active members of the royal household and their direct legal representatives. Let that sink in. Active members. Direct legal representatives. That sounds harmless until you realize what it excludes. Meghan. Entirely. And even more shocking, any correspondence involving her children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, will be routed exclusively through the palace's legal team, as needed and in alignment with established succession protocols. Translation? She'll be told nothing. And if she is, it'll be too late. Imagine being told your children's royal status, titles, or public positions have changed after the fact. Imagine finding out through the news. Imagine realizing that the family you once married into now communicates with you the same way they'd alert a third-party vendor, only if necessary. That's not exclusion. That's obliteration. And the palace? They won't deny it. Because technically, Meghan is no longer a working royal. And that's the loophole they've weaponized. But here's where it gets interesting. Because this wasn't leaked. It wasn't whispered by a source. It was confirmed. Buried at the bottom of a palace briefing, a half-page digital attachment sent to press offices and senior aides. The memo made its way into royal inboxes like a cold gust through a cracked window. And the minute it hit the wire, things started moving behind the scenes. Phones rang in Montecito. Advisors scrambled. But Meghan? She didn't speak. Not to the press. Not on Instagram. Not even in vague quotes from sources close to the Duchess. Because what do you say when the institution doesn't just exile you? It legally rewrites the rules so that you don't even exist in the conversation anymore. Now, here's the twist. This wasn't an isolated move. It was part of a larger, classified succession modernization briefing. A set of internal documents prepared by the Office of the Private Secretary. And those documents? They've been in the works for nearly 2 years. Yes, 2 years. Meaning, this wasn't spontaneous. It was a slow-cooked, premeditated erasure. So who approved the final language? That's where the royal intrigue intensifies. Because though King Charles's name was attached, palace insiders say the draft originated elsewhere. Not in Clarence House, not in Buckingham, but in a small office tucked inside Kensington Palace. Yes, that's William's domain. And yes, that detail matters. Because it points to a much bigger story. One where William, not Charles, is now quietly controlling the chessboard. Think about it. Charles has been handing off more and more day-to-day responsibilities in the wake of increasing health rumors. And William? He's stepping in, not just with public appearances, but with decisions. Strategic ones, brutal ones. And this memo? It was a message. One that says, the new monarchy will be lean, controlled, and unbreakable. And Meghan? She's the first casualty. But here's what no one predicted. The fallout from this memo wasn't just emotional. It triggered a ripple effect, one that reached lawyers, royal historians, and even constitutional advisors in the House of Lords. Because Meghan's exclusion from these communications raises a constitutional contradiction. How can someone be excluded from succession discussions involving her own children, who are in the line of succession, unless something more permanent is being prepared? And that's the chilling whisper making its way through London, that this memo was step one in a larger process, a process designed to permanently redefine the Sussex children's relationship to the throne. But we'll get to that in a future chapter. Let's zoom in for a moment on what this means for Meghan personally. Because behind the legal language, this memo did something even more damaging. It humiliated her. Publicly. No, it didn't name her. But it didn't have to. Because everyone, from the press to protocol experts to royal staffers, knew what it meant. And when Meghan's name was left off that distribution list, so was her dignity. And that's not an accident. Because institutions like the monarchy don't strike with loud declarations. They bleed you with 1,000 cuts. Quietly. And in ways that are almost impossible to fight. This is the strategy Diana feared. The one she warned about. A silent erasure dressed as procedure. And now, it's playing out again. But this time, there's something even more disturbing. Because when Diana was pushed out, she still had some leverage. The public, the press, her own charisma. But Meghan? She's thousands of miles away. No longer a working royal. No longer receiving security or briefings or access. She's adrift. Tied by name to a royal system that no longer acknowledges her. And it's not just symbolic. It's existential. Because this memo is more than a boundary. It's a precedent. One that says, even if you marry in, even if you have royal children, even if your face appears on official souvenirs, we can still shut you out. Completely. And that brings us to the quiet detail almost everyone missed. Buried in the metadata of the internal version of the memo, the one sent to legal advisors, is a document title. Modernization, Non-Working Spouses. Yes, that's the category Meghan's now officially in. Non-working spouse. That's what they're calling her. Not Duchess. Not former Royal Highness. Just non-working spouse. Like she's the wife of a diplomat who left his post years ago. No mention of the children. No mention of the service. No mention of the global campaigns or patronages she once championed. Just a label. A legal downgrade. And while the public version of the memo was scrubbed of that title, insiders say that's the language being used internally now. So here's the question I want to ask you. Is this just protocol? Or is it punishment? Because the palace may call this modernization, but the timing, the phrasing, the deliberate exclusion, it all reeks of something more personal, more calculated, more final. And as Meghan remains silent, as her team tries to craft a response that won't set off another media firestorm, as Harry reportedly spirals between frustration and numb acceptance. The palace moves on, unbothered, unapologetic, unshakable. But this memo, this four-sentence act of royal redaction, is more than just a document. It's a warning shot, and what comes next could unravel everything. Because while the ink on the memo was still drying, another, older document began circulating among royal aides. An agreement, one Meghan signed before her wedding, one that may come back to haunt her in ways she never expected. But what that document says, and who leaked it, will change the entire narrative. And no one, not even Meghan, saw it coming. What does it mean to be erased? Not with drama, but with procedure. To be cut off, not by family, but by function? That's what Meghan Markle is facing right now. Because this isn't just about a memo. It's about a protocol purge. And in royal terms, that's a bloodless coup. Think about it. If you're no longer included in protocol communications, you're no longer relevant to the royal machine. Not even symbolically. Not even for show. And Meghan? She's now outside the gates, watching the crown carry on without her. But here's the part no one's unpacking yet. The specifics of what Meghan is now forbidden from accessing. Because when the palace says she'll be excluded from future succession communications, that's not just PR jargon. That's a direct hit to the very channels that once made her, however briefly, part of the royal core. Let's break it down. There are 5 primary categories of royal protocol that Meghan is now cut off from. Line of succession briefings, ceremonial updates, royal household planning documents, children's title status communications, security coordination notices. Each one tells a deeper story. Let's start with the first. 1. Line of succession briefings. Every month, a quiet list is circulated among senior royal households, sometimes physical, sometimes digital, that lays out the most current interpretation of the line of succession. Yes, the order is mostly stable, but circumstances shift. Legal interpretations are challenged. Advisors tweak ceremonial language. And at times, especially with new births, deaths, or legislative changes, this list becomes a diplomatic minefield. Previously, even inactive royals like Harry and Meghan would receive indirect access to this via legal liaisons. No longer. Meghan's name has now been removed from all LO's circulation lists. Not paused, removed. Which means if a crisis unfolds, say, a regency is discussed, or an emergency title reallocation is needed, Meghan won't be told. Not even if it involves her children. Now ask yourself, is that protocol or punishment? 2. Ceremonial updates. Every major royal event, trooping the color, state openings, jubilee planning, involves an army of behind-the-scenes preparation, seating arrangements, invitations, public duties, order of precedence. These are decided by documents called ceremonial briefing notes. In the past, Meghan would have received these, even if she wasn't attending, for courtesy and awareness. After all, as a mother to royal children, her logistical presence mattered. But now, she's off the ceremonial distribution list entirely. Which means if Archie or Lilibet are ever invited to participate in a royal ceremony, say, as page boys, flower girls, or even spectators, Meghan won't know unless someone tells her informally. She'll be guessing. Worse, planning blind. And in royal circles, missteps in ceremony are not forgiven. They're weaponized. 3. Royal household planning documents. This one is technical and dangerous. Every royal household maintains its own annual strategy file, a confidential binder or digital file that outlines travel schedules, event appearances, media embargoes, crisis communications protocols, succession contingency plans. Previously, Meghan's household, the Sussex office, would receive redacted versions of these. Again, not as privilege, but as logistical necessity. Now, blocked. And not just blocked, overwritten. Sources say the term Sussex household has been replaced internally with Archewell Private. And Archewell, according to the palace, is a non-governmental entity with no bearing on crown operations. Let that settle in. The palace is no longer acknowledging any overlap between Meghan's world and theirs. It's a firewall, and firewalls, by design, are not built to be breached. 4. Children's title status communications. Here's where things get chilling. Archie and Lilibet are royal. By blood. By technical right. Yet their titles, and more importantly, their recognition, depend on palace discretion. There's no law that requires the palace to consult Meghan before making changes to how Archie or Lilibet are styled. And now, there's confirmation, they won't. According to internal protocol changes that emerged shortly after the exclusion memo, any updates to title stylings or succession references for Archie or Lilibet will be shared with the appropriate legal guardians where applicable, subject to institutional discretion. That's bureaucratic language for we'll tell who we choose when we choose. And it opens the door to a haunting possibility. What if the palace reclassifies Archie and Lilibet, say, changes their official styling on the royal website, or omits them from succession literature, and Meghan isn't informed? Would Harry be looped in? Maybe, but maybe not. That discretion now lies with the crown. And the fact that Meghan's access has been officially terminated means they're prepared to act without her knowledge or consent. 5. Security coordination notices. You know what's more terrifying than being excluded? Being uninformed when your children are at risk. In the royal ecosystem, security is handled by a joint task force involving the Royal and Diplomatic Protection Group, MI5 liaison officers, local police for domestic UK events. When royals travel or appear in public, security coordination memos are sent to all relevant parties, including parents or guardians. Meghan used to receive these when Archie was a baby, but now she's off the list, meaning if Archie or Lilibet attend a royal event in the future, even as guests, she won't be included in security briefings. Let that settle in. The mother of 2 royal children is now excluded from communications regarding their safety. Protocol? Or power play? You tell me. But here's where it gets truly dark. This isn't just a paper trail. This is a psychological maneuver. Because when you exclude someone from every meaningful touchpoint of their children's royal lives, you're not just erasing them, you're destabilizing them. You're forcing them to live in a fog of secondhand information, hearsay, and emotional guesswork. And for Meghan, a woman who once stood on palace balconies and smiled for Commonwealth cameras, this is a descent. A slow, quiet descent into institutional invisibility. But there's one more layer to this. A contradiction hiding in plain sight. Because even though Meghan is being excluded, she's still legally tied to the institution via marriage. Which means she bears the burden of royal association, the criticism, the surveillance, the endless media scrutiny. Without the benefits, without the communication, without the control. It's the worst of both worlds. And if you think this exclusion only impacts her, think again. Because silence is contagious. And sources say Harry is next. But what came next would expose not only the full extent of Meghan's erasure, but the ruthless inner workings of the people who pushed it through. And it all leads back to 2 unlikely figures, Princess and Prince William. Their alliance changed everything. And what they proposed behind closed doors. No one, not even the king, saw it coming. What if the decision to erase Meghan didn't come from the king? What if the real architects were a prince and a princess? Both second-born, both underestimated, and both fed up? Because while the world watches Charles, while the headlines obsess over Harry and Meghan, something far more strategic has been happening quietly behind the scenes. And at the heart of it, Prince William and Princess Anne, 2 royals who, on the surface, couldn't be more different. One, the heir to the throne. The other, a lifelong workhorse who's never craved the spotlight. But dig deeper, and you'll find a shared trait. Unshakable loyalty to the firm. And an even more dangerous quality? They don't forgive. Not easily. Not publicly. And certainly not when they believe the crown has been embarrassed. So here's the question no one's been asking. What if the push to exclude Meghan from succession communications didn't originate with Charles, but was recommended, even demanded, by his own children and sister? What if this wasn't about streamlining the monarchy? What if it was about retaliation? Let's go back to the meeting. Because there was one. Several, in fact. We now know that in early autumn, a private strategy session took place at Sandringham. The usual suspects were there, senior advisors, legal teams, and select members of the royal family. Not Harry, not Meghan, just the inner circle. And at the center of the table, Princess and Prince William. Insiders say, and arrived early, that she brought a handwritten folder titled Protocol Clarity. That she opened the session with a calm but sharp directive. We must no longer confuse courtesy with chaos. According to a leaked excerpt, Anne's argument was chilling in its precision. Meghan had removed herself from royal duties. She had violated confidentiality by speaking to American media. She had, in Anne's words, compromised the institution by engaging in selective victimhood. And then came the quote that's reportedly burned into the notes of one royal aide. If you choose to leave the fortress, you don't get to keep the keys. That set the tone. But the real fire? It came from William. This was not the diplomatic, duty-bound heir the public knows. This was a man with months, years, of simmering frustration. And he didn't mince words. According to those present, William bluntly stated, "We can't move forward with 1 foot still in California." Translation: you can't modernize the monarchy with ghosts from the past haunting every decision. And William was done being haunted. From the Oprah interview to the Netflix docuseries to Harry's memoir, William has been publicly dragged without response. Quiet, stoic, holding the line. But behind closed doors, sources say he exploded. He reportedly described the Sussex saga as a virus of confusion, one that blurred roles, strained press relations, and eroded trust within the palace staff. And Meghan, he believed, was at the center of it. So he proposed something radical. Not a public demotion, not a statement of disapproval, but a legal and procedural exclusion. No drama, no spectacle, just silence. Strategic, inescapable silence. According to one palace insider, William's tone during the meeting was stone cold. No shouting, no theatrics, just a list of items he wanted implemented. Meghan's removal from all internal protocol briefings. A restructuring of security classifications regarding her children. A redefinition of the Sussex unit as non-essential. But here's where it gets especially revealing. Charles hesitated. Yes, the king. The man with the ultimate authority. He paused. Why? Because despite everything, despite the media war, the exile, the damage, Charles still sees Harry as his son. Still believes reconciliation might one day be possible. Still, perhaps, hopes to see his grandchildren grow up with some connection to their heritage. But William? He doesn't share that dream. He's not a sentimentalist. He's a strategist. And to him, clarity is more important than reconciliation. So when Charles expressed reluctance, when he reportedly said, "Let's not rush this," William responded with a question that changed the room. Are we a family? Or are we an institution? And then came Anne. Ever the realist, she supported William with surgical precision. She reminded the room of precedents, that when the Duke of Windsor abdicated, his wife was denied all titles, updates, and succession insights. Why? Because trust matters more than blood. And in Anne's eyes, Meghan had broken that trust. With interviews, with disclosures, with lifestyle brands that blurred the royal commercial line. She wasn't just a liability. She was a precedent waiting to be codified. And then William presented a united front. One rooted in historical continuity. One packaged as modernization. But make no mistake, this was personal. This was power. And Charles? He conceded. Slowly, grudgingly, but inevitably. Because even kings need heirs to keep the machine running. And William? He's not waiting. He's acting. In fact, some insiders now believe this move, the exclusion of Meghan from all succession updates, is William's first major exercise of shadow authority. His way of signaling that his monarchy will be leaner, tighter, and far less tolerant of deviation. And Anne? She's the quiet enforcer. The one with nothing to prove and everything to protect. Their alliance is formidable. And their message is clear. No more leaks. No more confusion. No more gray areas. You're either in, or you're out. And Meghan? She's out. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. With a signature on a document she'll never see. And a decision that echoes across generations. But here's the twist. While William and Anne may have succeeded in excluding Meghan from the room, they didn't account for one thing. Someone was watching. Someone who took notes. Someone whose loyalty isn't as secure as they thought. And what that person leaked next could blow this entire plan wide open. Because buried deep in the aftermath of the Sandringham meeting was a separate set of documents. Documents that didn't just confirm Meghan's exclusion. They revealed something far more dangerous. A proposed clause involving guardianship. One that raised a question no mother should ever have to ask. If I'm not allowed to be involved in their future, who is? How deep does a royal exclusion really go? You think it stops at palace corridors? At family squabbles and cold glances? Think again. Because while the cameras were focused on Harry and Meghan's Netflix deals, while gossip channels debated Christmas invitations and coronation seats, something far more sinister was unfolding, not in California, but in Westminster, behind the closed, oak-paneled doors of the House of Lords. Yes, Parliament. Not a tabloid. Not a TikTok rumor. A legislative chamber. And what they were quietly discussing could change everything for Meghan Markle, and, more terrifyingly, for her children. Because what started as a royal protocol memo has now become a constitutional chess game. Let's break it down. Sometime between late summer and early autumn, whispers began surfacing about a special session being quietly arranged by the Lords Communications Committee, a body that rarely makes headlines but wields enormous influence over the monarchy's public and legal frameworks. This session, sources claim, was off-calendar, not officially announced, not live-streamed, no press gallery permitted, just a handful of peers, hereditary and life-appointed, convening to review existing succession protocols in the interest of modernization. Sounds harmless, right? Just paperwork, administrative cleanup, until you realize who was present. Lord True, leader of the House of Lords. Viscount Hailsham, a constitutional conservative with a legal background. Baroness Heelick, a specialist in institutional reform. And, perhaps most notably, Lord Geit. Yes, that Lord Geit, the former private secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, the same man who once oversaw royal discipline with terrifying precision. His attendance? Alarming. His silence since? Even more so. Now here's where it gets fascinating and deeply disturbing. According to documents later leaked to a constitutional analyst, who posted then deleted a cryptic tweet, one of the core topics of the Lord's session was clarification of succession rights and information privileges as they pertain to non-resident, non-working descendants of the sovereign. That's coded language for Harry and Meghan's kids. Specifically, what kind of access Meghan is entitled to, if any, in matters of their royal standing. Let's ask the obvious. Why does the House of Lords care? Because under UK constitutional monarchy, the sovereign is bound by laws passed and reviewed by Parliament, especially when it comes to succession. And right now, there's a gap, a vacuum of clarity regarding how far spouses of non-working royals can be involved in issues relating to royal lineage, guardianship, and ceremonial roles. This isn't just semantics. It's constitutional vulnerability. And some in the Lords are trying to patch it, fast. Why? Because Meghan Markle isn't just a duchess on paper. She's a global media figure, a wild card, an outsider who no longer plays by the rules, and who could, at any moment, speak out, write another book, or worse, challenge royal decisions through legal means. And that is a nightmare the Crown cannot afford. So what was actually said during this private Lord session? We don't have transcripts, but we do have leaks. And one particularly haunting line, shared via anonymous source and verified by a second peer, allegedly appears in the draft notes. There exists no legal obligation for the palace to confer ongoing succession briefings to individuals no longer recognized as operational within the Crown ecosystem. Did you catch that? Crown ecosystem. That's a phrase rarely used, and when it is, it's code for the inner sanctum of royal functionaries. Meghan? She's no longer part of it. Officially. Legally. And now, potentially, irrevocably. Because if the Lords adopt a formal interpretation based on that line, it sets a precedent, one that could be used to justify not just her exclusion, but the quiet downgrading of her children's status, should the monarchy choose to act. And here's where it gets even colder. The Lords are not acting in a vacuum. They're working with palace legal teams. In fact, one of the advisors reportedly involved in drafting the discussion materials is a barrister with deep ties to the monarchy and a former senior partner at the same legal firm Meghan once worked with during her early acting career. You heard that right. A man once connected to Meghan's legal representation, now helping architect her exclusion. Poetic or planned? And then came the most shocking part of all. Because hidden within this Lord's review was a clause. A proposed clause. One that sent chills through the few insiders who saw it. It reads, In circumstances where a parent is deemed non-operational and residing outside the jurisdiction of the Crown, the responsibility for succession-related guardianship advisement shall rest with the active legal guardian residing within the jurisdiction. Translation: if decisions are ever made about the children's involvement in royal affairs, be it ceremonial, educational, or even relocation, and if the parents disagree, only the parent within the UK jurisdiction will be recognized as having consultative rights. That's Harry, not Meghan. Think about that. Let it truly hit. Because in a worst-case scenario, this clause could be used, if ever formalized, to strip Meghan of any say over how her children engage with their royal heritage. A photo op? A trip? A ceremony? A school placement? She'd have no voice. She might not even be notified. Because the clause defines consultative rights strictly in terms of geography and royal operational status. And Meghan fails on both counts. Now, is this clause officially adopted? Not yet. It was presented as a recommendation for future guidance. But that's how these things start. First as recommendations, then as footnotes, then one day as law. And the fact that this clause exists at all tells us everything. The monarchy and the state are preparing for permanent distance. What if your royal title wasn't really yours? What if the ink on the royal birth certificate was barely dry before the conversations about your place began? What if, before you could even speak, your future was already being rewritten, quietly, coldly, and without your mother in the room? Because that's what sources are now whispering about Archie and Lilibet. The Sussex children. Prince Archie of Sussex. Princess Lilibet of Sussex. Titles granted. Recognized. Publicized. But behind the scenes, there's a growing belief that their royal fate has already been sealed. Not in law. Not yet. But in principle. And in this monarchy, principles become protocol fast. Let's rewind. When Archie was born in 2019, Meghan and Harry made a stunning decision. No royal title. They said they wanted normalcy, protection, privacy. But insiders now claim that wasn't entirely voluntary. Because behind closed doors, debates were raging about what Archie could be titled and what message it would send. Fast forward to 2021. Lilibet is born. Still no titles. But when Queen Elizabeth passed away in 2022, everything changed. By precedent, as grandchildren of the reigning monarch, both children became eligible for princely titles. And in March 2023, the palace quietly updated its website. Prince Archie, Princess Lilibet. Just like that. Public recognition. A signal that, despite everything, the bloodline still mattered. Or did it? Because now, with Meghan formally excluded from succession briefings, and with the House of Lords reviewing succession rights for non-working royals' children, there's a growing sense that the titles may be in name only. Symbolic. Revocable. And worse, already neutered behind the scenes. Here's what we now know. According to leaked briefing notes from a recent palace planning session, held under the code name Cedar Light, the working assumption going forward is this. No expectation of senior role or operational duty to be placed upon the Sussex minors. Now, at first glance, that seems fair. They live in America. Their parents are non-working royals. Let them be children. But read deeper. Because that sentence isn't just about avoiding royal duties. It's about removal from the inner circle. About preparing for a monarchy where Archie and Lilibet aren't just uninvolved, they're unrecognized. Sources say Cedar Light is part of a broader internal planning effort to redefine what royalty means for the next 2 generations. Key decisions discussed in the session included whether Archie and Lilibet should appear on future official royal family trees, whether their HRH styling should be used in any internal documents, whether they should be invited to future royal milestone events, e.g. coronations, jubilees, whether their names will be preserved on constitutional order documents. Let's pause on that last one. Because constitutional order documents, especially those relating to the Council of State, determine who can legally act on behalf of the monarch. Archie and Lilibet aren't old enough to qualify yet, but someday they will be. And according to tradition, their names would be added. But palace insiders now suggest that day may never come. Because unless their place in the succession line is actively preserved and affirmed through internal consensus, their future could be locked out before it even starts. All while they're still children. all while Meghan remains in the dark. Now, legally speaking, Archie is still sixth in line. Lilibet is seventh. But line doesn't guarantee privilege. It doesn't guarantee duty. And it definitely doesn't guarantee inclusion, especially not when Meghan, their mother, has been formally, and now procedurally, excluded from any input on how their titles evolve. And this is where it gets even darker. Because there's growing speculation among constitutional experts that a dormant succession clause is being explored, one that would effectively allow the palace to freeze a royal's path to duty without revoking their place in the line. Sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? But here's how it works. Instead of making a dramatic public move to remove Archie and Lilibet from succession, which would spark outrage, the palace simply chooses to ignore their existence when crafting future duty frameworks. They're not removed. They're just overlooked. By design. That way, no scandal, no backlash, no monarchy erases biracial royal children headline. Just quiet exclusion. And that exclusion becomes real through logistics. Example: no invite to trooping the color when they turn 10. No seating arrangement in future coronation rehearsals. No coat of arms registered. No future mention in succession briefings to the Privy Council. At that point, what are they? Titled, but unacknowledged. Royal, but unofficial. Children of a prince, but strangers to the palace. And for Meghan, that's the ultimate nightmare. Because she fought so hard to protect their innocence, to protect their identity. But how do you protect what you're not even allowed to see? How do you advocate for children whose royal existence has been ghosted? And if you think this is just media speculation, it's not. There's paperwork, internal memos. One titled Post-Sussex Offspring Status Consideration, SOSC, has been mentioned in multiple leaks. Its purpose? To define a symbolic presence policy for royal children living abroad and raised outside palace protocol. Translation: if Archie and Lilibet are too far away, physically and institutionally, then their titles and roles become ceremonial, like a distant relative on a family tree no one visits. But here's the emotional gut punch. Harry knows. Multiple insiders confirm Harry has been briefed. Not fully, not officially, but enough. Enough to know that his children's future in the monarchy is being, quote, compartmentalized for future flexibility. That's the phrase a senior aide used. Compartmentalized. Not rejected. Not erased. Just boxed away. Like a decision waiting on a shelf. To be pulled down later, dusted off, and quietly made permanent. So here's the haunting question. What happens when Archie turns 18? Will he still be a prince? Will he be allowed to participate in any royal affairs? Will he even want to? Because by then, the damage may already be done. The bonds already severed. The institution already turned cold. And the worst part? His mother may have never had a say, never had access, never even seen the draft documents. Because Meghan, officially and formally, is now on the outside. And the line of succession? It marches on without her, without explanation, without apology. But there's one thing the palace didn't expect. They thought locking Meghan out would silence her. They thought sidelining Harry would neutralize him. But something shifted. Because Harry's reaction to the latest revelations wasn't what the palace predicted. According to one Montecito source, he did something unexpected. He called someone. Not Meghan. Not Doria. Not even a lawyer. He called a journalist. A high-profile one. And what he shared could blow this entire thing wide open. What if the very nightmare Princess Diana once whispered about in the shadows of Kensington Palace was now unfolding, not for her, but for her son's wife and her grandchildren? What if the very ghosts she feared were now back, not haunting corridors, but shaping policy? Because according to those who knew Diana best, what's happening to Meghan isn't new. It's not unprecedented. It's not unexpected. It's a continuation of a cycle, a pattern, a royal system that, when threatened, doesn't attack with swords or words, but with silence. A quiet, polished, devastating silence. And this time, it's targeting Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet. The parallels are chilling. Start here. In the early 1990s, Diana began expressing fears in her private correspondence, some letters, some audio, that the royal establishment would ultimately try to cut her out entirely. Not just from decisions, not just from public appearances, but from her sons. And now, history is rhyming. Because Meghan is being cut out too. First, from communications. then from ceremonial briefings, and now, as we've seen, from influence over her children's royal future. And all of it eerily echoes Diana's own isolation after her divorce from Charles. But here's where the story takes a turn no one expected. A long-lost tape. Yes, one of the infamous Diana tapes recorded in secret by journalist Andrew Morton in the early 90s, was recently re-reviewed in light of current events. And in it, Diana says something shocking. One day, they'll do the same to another woman. She'll be loved too quickly, speak too loudly, and before long, she'll be gone. But the children? The children will always be the weapon. Read that again. The children will always be the weapon. Decades later, that line cuts like glass. Because today, we're watching that prophecy come true, almost frame for frame. Diana feared the palace would weaponize access to her children to control her. She feared that once she was out, her influence would vanish. And Meghan is living that exact scenario. Exiled, voiceless, watching her children's royal identities get redefined behind velvet curtains. But the similarities don't end there. Diana was hounded by press leaks she didn't authorize. So is Meghan. Diana was accused of being difficult, unstable, too emotional. So is Meghan. Diana was stripped of her HRH title and excluded from official briefings once the divorce was finalized. And Meghan, while still married, is already functionally excluded, perhaps worse. Because unlike Diana, who had some support from the Queen Mother and a few senior staff, Meghan has been left with nothing. No defenders inside the institution. No formal role. Not even the courtesy of being told when decisions are being made about her children's titles or future. But the most haunting parallel? The ghost of royal guardianship. In 1995, Diana expressed fears that should anything happen to her, she would not have final say over her boy's guardianship. Why? Because a little-known clause within the Royal Household Handbook designated the sovereign as the ultimate legal guardian of minor royal heirs. That clause has never been publicly overturned. And now, whispers suggest a modern version of it, Royal Guardianship Act Interpretation Addendum, is being re-evaluated. Why now? Because of Archie and Lilibet. Because of their ambiguous status. And because Meghan, as an American, as a non-working royal, as an outsider, may be considered unfit in the eyes of traditional succession custodians to determine her children's long-term royal roles. Diana feared this. She warned of it. She tried to document it. And now, Meghan is navigating the same icy labyrinth. Only this time, there's no official marriage separation, no divorce decree, no formalized custody agreement, just whispers, and memos, and procedural blocks. But here's where the contradictions scream loudest. The monarchy still uses Diana's image when it suits them. Photos of her at charity events, clips of her hugging children, her legacy as the people's princess. But her warnings, her fears, her cries for institutional reform? Ignored, suppressed, and now, perhaps, repeated. Because just like Diana, Meghan entered the royal family with hope. She believed the institution would modernize, that her background would be celebrated, not used as ammunition, that her children would be loved without condition. Instead, she's watching the same pattern of cold dismissal play out. Only now it's updated with legal briefings and digital silence. But what if that's not the end of the story? Because here's what most people forget. Diana fought back. She didn't disappear. She didn't go quietly. She used her voice, sometimes recklessly, sometimes strategically, to force the world to see behind the curtain. And Meghan? She has that same fire. The question is, will she use it? Or is the machinery now too advanced, too coordinated, too ready? Because Meghan doesn't just face the crown. She faces the weight of decades of institutional expertise designed to do one thing. Survive. Survive scandal. Survive dissent. Survive love stories that go rogue. So where does that leave Archie and Lilibet? Caught between two mothers, one alive, one a ghost. One fighting to protect them in real time. The other warning them from history. Because Diana's voice, long thought buried under tributes and sound bites, is starting to echo louder than ever. And in Montecito, that echo is becoming impossible to ignore, especially for Harry, because insiders say that after reading that line from his mother's tape, the children will always be the weapon. Harry became visibly shaken. And then, he made a decision. He reached out to someone unexpected, Not a royal, not a lawyer, but a former palace aide who once served as Diana's liaison during the separation proceedings. Why? Because Harry wants to know if history is repeating itself, and if there's still time to stop it. What he learned during that call would devastate him, and it involves a document he thought was destroyed years ago. A document his mother once signed, and that now could have consequences for Meghan. Why hasn't he said anything? Why hasn't Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the once fiery royal rebel, the man who walked away from it all, come forward? Why, as Meghan is being iced out of the palace system, are we met with deafening silence from the one person who could challenge the crown from the inside? Is it loyalty? Is it fear? Or is it powerlessness? Because make no mistake, behind Harry's silence is a storm, and it's growing. Let's rewind. When the palace memo was released, the one confirming Meghan's exclusion from all future succession-related communications, even those involving Archie and Lilibet, insiders say Harry knew. Not through the press, not through a public statement, but through a back channel, a discreet call, a carefully worded briefing delivered via a trusted palace contact. The same person who used to handle press crises when Harry was still a working royal. And Harry? He didn't respond right away. In fact, those closest to him say he did something unusual. He went silent, retreated, even from Meghan. For 3 days, Harry reportedly shut himself away in his Montecito office. No phone, no laptop, no public comments. What was he thinking? Only one person claims to know. A friend from his army days, who flew in for a private visit and spoke anonymously to a journalist weeks later. According to this friend, Harry was staring down the barrel of a truth he didn't want to admit. And what was that truth? That he may be the reason this is happening. That by breaking away from the crown, by lobbing truth bombs from California, by writing spare, by naming names, and challenging protocol, he may have pushed the monarchy into defensive mode. And now? Meghan and the children are paying the price. That's the guilt no one talks about. That behind Harry's silence may be shame. Because in trying to protect Meghan, he may have triggered the very machinery Diana once feared. But the silence isn't just personal. It's political. Because as much as Harry has distanced himself from the firm, he's never completely cut the cord. He's still a counselor of state, technically. He still holds a dukedom, for now. He still has secret channels of communication with the palace, including an encrypted weekly digest sent by a senior royal aide. And that digest? It's where Harry reportedly first saw the phrase, non-operative designation, Duchess of Sussex. A dry, bureaucratic label, but one that crushed him. Because in that moment, it wasn't just Meghan being cut out. It was his entire nuclear family being rendered irrelevant. So why doesn't he speak? Why not another Oprah interview? Why not a scathing New York Times op-ed? Because insiders say Harry is trapped in a paradox. He knows if he speaks out, especially now, he risks proving the palace right. That Meghan is a destabilizing force. That he can't be trusted with sensitive matters of succession. That their exile was necessary. And more dangerously, he risks triggering a clause few people know about. The compelled response protocol. It's a confidential agreement created in 2012 after Prince Andrew's legal scandal erupted. Under this internal directive, if a senior royal publicly challenges internal succession decisions with unsubstantiated claims, the palace has legal grounds to release select communications to the press in defense of the institution. In other words, if Harry speaks recklessly, the crown can hit back. With emails, with memos, with private context, all under the guise of institutional preservation. And guess what? The protocol was updated in 2020, months after Harry and Meghan's departure. Sources say the new version includes a Sussex amendment, specifically allowing the palace to clarify or rebut any and all statements made by the Duke or Duchess involving matters of succession, title entitlement, or sovereign responsibility. Translation: Harry goes public, the palace fights back, and the damage could be irreversible. To Meghan, to the kids, to their remaining threads of royal status. So he stays silent, at least in public. But here's what the world doesn't know. In private, Harry is fighting, just not the way anyone expected. Remember that call from the end of Chapter 6? The one to his mother's former liaison? What Harry discovered during that call was this: a document, buried in the palace archives, forgotten by most, but still very real. A post-separation agreement Diana signed under duress, outlining her understanding of custodial expectations for William and Harry in the event of her death. The original was thought destroyed, but a copy remains, and it contains something explosive. A clause stating that any future heirs born of Diana's line would be subject to the same succession constraints, unless explicitly exempted by sovereign decree. Think about that. It means that, technically, Harry's children could be subjected to the same invisible leashes placed on him and William. Unless Charles steps in, unless there's a formal exemption, which, so far, there hasn't been. That's why Harry panicked, because the legacy of control Diana fought to escape might still be shackling Archie and Lilibet. And Meghan doesn't even know, because the palace hasn't told her, because Harry hasn't told her. Not yet, because he's torn between his love for his wife and his fear of unleashing a royal counterattack that could destroy what little remains of their link to the crown. So he waits. He hesitates. He watches. And meanwhile, the palace advances. New protocol documents are being reviewed. Old titles are being reassessed. A revised line of succession statement is reportedly being prepared, one that subtly downplays the Sussex branch. And Harry? He knows it's happening. But he's stuck. Because the minute he speaks, everything explodes. So is he loyal? Yes, to Meghan, to his mother's memory, to his children. But is he also powerless? Absolutely. Because the monarchy was built to outlast storms. Even storms like Harry. Even storms like Diana. Even the hurricane that is Meghan Markle. And that's what haunts him. That he left for freedom. But the system never really let go. Not of him. Not of his children. And now, the silence that once protected the crown. She built a brand on reinvention. From actress to duchess. From duchess to exile. From exile to entrepreneur. But now Meghan Markle stands at a crossroads that no rebrand, no podcast, no avocado toast quote can fix. Because this isn't just a PR problem. This is existential. She's not just being excluded. She's being erased, slowly, officially, and with surgical precision. And as the palace continues its campaign of procedural silence, one question looms over Montecito like a storm cloud. What will Meghan do next? Because whatever she chooses, to fight back or walk away, will define not only her legacy, but her children's, and maybe even Harry's. Let's be clear, Meghan is no stranger to media warfare. She's faced down the British tabloids, sued the Mail on Sunday, delivered that interview with Oprah, released a Netflix docuseries that pulled no punches. She's spoken about suicidal ideation. She's accused the institution of racism. She's challenged century-old traditions. And she survived. But this moment is different. Why? Because it's not about public opinion anymore. It's about power. The palace hasn't fired a public shot. They haven't denied her stories. They haven't released statements. They've simply removed her from the lists, from the plans, from the future. So Meghan has two options: crisis PR or quiet exit. Let's explore both. Option 1, the counterattack. Insiders say Meghan's team has already convened what one source dubbed a containment council. Not a strategy meeting, not a branding workshop, a containment council. That's what you do when you realize the walls are closing in faster than you expected. So what's being discussed? 3 avenues. A controlled leak to an American outlet. Meghan's team may provide insider detail, just enough to stir sympathy, without confirming classified information. Think, a Page 6 or Vanity Fair exclusive. A source close to the Duchess expressing disappointment and surprise at recent succession decisions. A documentary sequel, Harry and Meghan, Part 2. A more raw, more focused deep dive on how their children are being marginalized. Titles: Communications, Parental Rights. This would be nuclear, but it's on the table. A landmark speech. Meghan standing solo. At a foundation. At an awards gala. Delivering a subtle but undeniable statement about motherhood, legacy, and systemic erasure. She wouldn't say royal family. She wouldn't say palace. But everyone would know. This route plays to her strength: direct, polished, elegant indignation. But the risks? Massive. Because any open challenge to the palace right now could trigger the compelled response protocol we discussed earlier, allowing the crown to release selective truths to defend the institution. Emails, meeting notes, Moments Meghan thought were private. One wrong move, and the palace might do what it never did with Diana. Fight back. So is she prepared for that? Some say yes. That Meghan is in full Fortress Montecito mode, checking phones, securing her inner circle, preemptively consulting lawyers. Others say she's burned out. And that leads us to option 2. Option 2, the quiet exit. Imagine this. No statements, no interviews, no reaction, just silence. Meghan focuses on Archewell. She quietly winds down with Love, Meghan, or pivots it to lifestyle only. She declines invitations to speak about the monarchy. She returns to California philanthropy, celebrity circles, curated appearances. In this version, Meghan becomes a soft exile. Still married to Harry. Still titled, technically, but spiritually, gone. And you know what? That may be what the palace wants. Because to them, silence is the ultimate surrender. And if Meghan chooses this route, she retains plausible deniability. She avoids being painted as the problem. She keeps her peace. But there's a catch. A devastating one. The children. Because choosing silence means letting the system define Archie and Lilibet's future without protest. It means letting the palace